I had lived for 35 years without ever imagining that a simple family dinner could shatter everything I believed about love, loyalty, and blood. It started like any other fall evening in Portland. The air outside the house was crisp, tinged with smoke from nearby chimneys. Through the frosted window panes of my parents' home, the soft flicker of candlelight danced across the dining table. The antique chandelier cast golden halos over each dish, roasted vegetables, beef stew simmering in its own rich juices, a freshly baked loaf of sourdough steaming gently on the breadboard. It looked like a postcard of warmth and reunion. But what I didn't know then, as I stepped through that front door, was that everything had already been staged. The food, the smiles, the timing, all of it was a beautifully orchestrated trap. 2 weeks earlier, my mother had called me out of the blue. "Claire," she said, her voice dripping with an unfamiliar softness, "you should come home for dinner. It's been too long. The whole family will be there." The whole family. I hadn't heard those words in over a decade. At first, I hesitated. I was used to her conditional affection, the way she only ever called when something needed fixing. A roof leak, a tuition bill, a tax notice they'd ignored. Still, a small part of me clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That they actually missed me, the daughter who had moved away, built a life in Seattle, and tried her best to maintain peace even from miles away. So I packed my overnight bag, left behind my back-to-back meetings, and drove 3 hours south to the city I used to call home. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother pulled me into a tight hug, perfumed and polished, smiling as if nothing had ever been broken between us. My father hovered behind her, nodding stiffly. The smell of stew wafted from the kitchen. I set my bag down, took off my coat, and followed her into the dining room where everything and everyone was already waiting. Ethan, my younger brother, was lounging at the head of the table like he owned the place, his hair still messy in that. I just woke up at noon, wearing a hoodie with some tech startup logo he probably didn't work for. Jasmine, our youngest sibling, sat beside him twirling a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair. Her nails were manicured. Her phone never left her hand. We exchanged shallow greetings. I smiled, trying to ignore the sense of unease curling in my stomach. Dinner began with clinking silverware and small talk about nothing. I picked at my stew, nodded along to Jasmine's monologue about an upcoming influencer retreat in Miami, and pretended not to notice the smirk playing on Ethan's lips every time he looked at me. Then, without warning, Ethan leaned back in his chair and said almost casually, "So, just to avoid any awkwardness later, Mom and Dad want you to know now. They finalized the will." I froze mid-bite. He glanced at Jasmine, who flashed a gleaming smile, then back at me. "The house, the Crater Lake cabin, everything. It's all going to us." I blinked. "What?" My mother set down her spoon and sighed like this was something I should have seen coming. "Claire, your father and I thought it was best to be transparent. We made the decision together." I turned to my father. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at me. Just kept his eyes on the glass of red wine in front of him. A hollow silence stretched across the table. The clink of Jasmine's spoon tapping porcelain was the only sound. Finally, Ethan broke it. "It's not personal. You're successful. You've got your own company, a house, investments. Jasmine and we need the support." A slow, sinking feeling crept over me. The room, once so warm, now felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. My stew turned to ash in my mouth. Jasmine gave a little shrug. "You'll be fine, Claire. You always are." I set my fork down. The dinner wasn't a reunion. It was a declaration, and I had walked straight into it. I stared at the three of them, each face more unreadable than the next. My mother looked down into her bowl as if the conversation had already moved past me. My father swirled his wine. Jasmine scrolled her phone like nothing important had just been said. And Ethan looked satisfied, as if this was a win he had been planning for months. I forced my voice to remain steady. So let me get this straight. Everything's going to you too, and I get, what? A pat on the back. Ethan chuckled under his breath. Don't be dramatic. No one said you get nothing. You get to keep what's yours. What's mine? I repeated, the heat rising to my face. Do you even know how many things you consider yours were actually mine? He shrugged, feigning innocence. You mean the time you paid the water bill? Come on. I leaned forward, my voice clipped and razor sharp. Try the 6 years of mortgage payments I covered when Dad's pension ran dry. The $40,000 I spent to renovate the Crater Lake cabin when the roof caved in. Or Jasmine's entire European design school phase, which, last I checked, ended in Ibiza with 0 degrees and maxed out credit cards. Jasmine finally looked up, rolling her eyes. Ugh, are you seriously keeping receipts, Claire? That's just sad. No, I said quietly. What's sad is how quickly you all forgot who was holding this family together. My mother lifted her head. Claire, that's not fair. You've always been obsessed with money. This family never asked you for anything. You offered. My jaw clenched, because you manipulated me into thinking I had to. Every time something went wrong, every time a bill arrived you couldn't pay, you called me. You didn't ask. You expected. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. You're successful, Claire. We thought you'd understand. That I'd understand being erased from your legacy? Jasmine sighed and sipped her wine. You have a company, a life. You'll be fine. Why do you even care about some house or an old cabin? I turned to her, stunned. Because that house was the only thing tying me back to this family. Because I paid for the roof that kept you warm. Because I thought I was investing in something real, in us. And now I find out you've all been planning this behind my back. My mother stiffened. Claire, you're overreacting. This is not some conspiracy. It's a practical decision. Practical, I repeated slowly. So cutting me out is just good strategy? It's not like that, my father murmured, but even he didn't sound convinced. I sat back, letting the silence settle. My chest was tight, my heart thudding against my ribs like a warning. I scanned their faces, not a single flicker of guilt, not a single ounce of gratitude. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource that had run its course. You know what's really practical? I said finally, my voice ice, realizing when you've been used and deciding to stop it. Ethan scoffed. Oh, here we go. Claire the martyr. You want a trophy for paying a few bills. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for me. That night, something broke in me, not a scream, not a sob, but something quieter, deeper. It was the shattering of an illusion I'd carried for far too long. That if I gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, they'd eventually see me. But they never had. They never would. I didn't wait for dessert. The moment I stood, the chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor, a sound so jarring it made even Jasmine glance up from her phone. I gathered my purse, slowly, deliberately, giving each second the weight it deserved. I've heard enough, I said, my voice cold, devoid of the emotion that had been bubbling under my skin. I'm done. My mother blinked, confused for half a second. What did you just say? I looked her dead in the eye. I said I'm done. With all of you. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smug. What? You're cutting off the family over a will. Grow up, Claire. I didn't even blink. Yes. And you'll understand exactly what that means very soon. I turned on my heel. My mother's voice snapped like a whip behind me. Claire, what the hell are you doing? You can't just walk out over a little disagreement. I stopped at the threshold, my hand resting on the doorknob, and turned to face her one last time. A little disagreement, I said, quietly, the words slicing through the room. This isn't a disagreement. This is betrayal. And then I walked out. The night air hit me like a slap, sharp and freezing. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just walked straight to my car, started the engine, and pulled out of that driveway like I would never return. Because I wouldn't. Not this time. The drive back to Seattle felt longer than usual. The highway was almost empty, but my thoughts weren't. I kept seeing their faces, my mother's hardened stare, my father's silence, Jasmine's smirk, Ethan's smug grin. And underneath it all, I felt something unraveling inside me. Not pain, not regret, just exhaustion. By the time I got home, it was nearly 1 a.m. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag on the couch, and went straight to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my banking app. $1,500 every month, the mortgage on the Portland house. $600 utilities, maintenance, phone bills. Then the extras, holidays, emergencies, tuition, renovations. It added up. I scrolled through the auto-pay section like I was sifting through a museum of bad decisions. And then I started hitting cancel. One by one. Mortgage, cancel. Utilities, cancel. Jasmine's school fund, still open, still empty, cancel. Ethan's startup loan, cancel. Emergency account linked to their names, cancel. With every tap, it felt like I was cutting a cord that had been strangling me for years. And when the final confirmation popped up, successfully canceled, I exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. But for the first time in a long time, I felt light. The next morning, the phone started ringing. The screen lit up with the name I knew would appear first. Mom. I watched it buzz. I didn't answer. Second call. Third. Voicemail pinged. Then came a string of texts. MOM Claire. I can't believe you did this. MOM. Do you have any idea how much the house is struggling? MOM. Don't be so selfish. Family is supposed to help each other. MOM. Call me back. I put the phone down, sipped my coffee, and stared out the window. I figured she'd figured it out by now. That the money had stopped flowing. That the free ride was over. An hour later, another name appeared. Dad. I stared at the screen. For a second, something old in me stirred. That part of me who used to answer his calls no matter where I was, who still clung to some idealized version of a protective father. But I let it go to voicemail. Later, I played it. Dad. Claire. Sweetheart, you need to reconsider. Your mother's very upset. You can't just cut ties over a small misunderstanding. We're family. I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. Family? If I had really been family, why did I have to earn every ounce of their affection with my bank account? In the afternoon, Jasmine called. I declined. Seconds later, a barrage of texts lit up my screen. Jasmine. Absolutely pathetic, Claire. Jasmine. You're such a petty and selfish person. Jasmine. If you didn't want to help, you should have said so instead of pretending to be the good one. Jasmine. You've destroyed this family. Congratulations. I didn't reply, but I did laugh. A dry, humorless sound that didn't come from amusement. It came from disbelief. They really thought I was the one in the wrong. By the time Ethan's name flashed on my screen, I was ready. I stared at the phone as it rang, hand hovering above the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, something old and sharp, wanted to hear what he had to say. I picked up. Ethan, I said flatly, what the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was already raised, hostile from the first breath. Taking back what's mine, I replied calm. You cut off support for Mom and Dad just because they didn't leave you anything? You're disgusting, Claire. Greedy. A leech. My fingers tightened around the phone. This isn't about inheritance, Ethan. This is about respect. Something none of you have ever shown me. He scoffed. Respect? You've always been the same. Controlling. Judgmental. Acting like you're better than everyone else. I am better, I said quietly, because I don't manipulate people for money. I don't pretend to be family while bleeding someone dry. You're a venomous snake, he snapped. You think you can walk away from this family without consequences? Just wait. He hung up. My heart thudded once in my chest hard. Not from fear. From clarity. I knew Ethan. I knew how he worked. He didn't bluff, and he didn't let things go quietly. So when I came home the next evening and saw my apartment door sealed shut with a hardened wall of gray-white foam, I wasn't surprised. I didn't panic. I didn't even curse. I just stood there, staring at the dried expansion foam that filled every crevice of the frame, hard as stone, like someone had tried to erase the entrance to my life. I pulled out my phone, opened the security camera app, and rewound the footage. There he was, gray hoodie, black jeans, baseball cap pulled low. But I knew that lazy gait, that posture, that smug little grin as he shook the can and sprayed foam into every crack of my doorframe, sealing it like a tomb. Ethan. Every movement he made was a taunt. Every second he stood there was a message. You're alone. You need us. Crawl back. But he didn't understand. I wasn't that woman anymore. I calmly saved the video, took 3 clear screenshots, and called the police. 30 minutes later, a young officer stood in front of my ruined door, notebook in hand, expression somewhere between disbelief and concern. "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" he asked. I gave him a tight smile. "Officer, I didn't call you here for a friendly chat." He nodded. "Name?" "Ethan Bennett." "Your brother?" "Not anymore." I gave him the footage, the timeline, and a printout of past texts Ethan had sent me, threatening, aggressive. The officer scribbled everything down, asked a few more questions, then handed me a case number. Before he left, he looked me in the eye and said, "You did the right thing." For the first time in days, I believed that. The next morning, my phone rang again. "Dad." I answered, already knowing how the conversation would go. "Claire," he began, tone gentle, almost pleading, "does this really have to go this far?" I didn't say anything. "I know Ethan acted out," he continued, "but he didn't mean to harm you. He was just upset." "Upset?" I snapped. He sealed my door shut with industrial foam. What if I had an important meeting? What if I had a child or a pet inside? What if there had been an emergency? Silence. "Claire, please. Don't make this into a legal mess. We're family." I let out a short laugh. "You still don't get it, do you? He made this a legal mess. He thought he could intimidate me. He picked the wrong target." There was another pause. Then, reluctantly, "What do you want to drop the charges?" I didn't hesitate. $33,000. His breath caught. "What?" "That covers the cost of the door, legal fees if this drags out, and emotional damages." "I'd say that's generous." "That's extortion." I smiled into the receiver. "No, Dad. That's consequences. He doesn't have that kind of money." "Then you and Mom can help him out. You've been covering for him his whole life. One more time won't kill you." He went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, low and tight, "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said softly. "This family tore itself apart a long time ago. I'm just done pretending to fix it." 3 days later, I woke up to a $33,000 deposit from my parents' joint account. No messages, no apologies, no explanations, just silence. And for once, that silence felt like victory. I had assumed that after wiring me the $33,000, they would finally leave me alone, that the silence meant surrender. I should have known better. Losing money was one thing. Losing control, that was something they couldn't tolerate. And when they realized they could no longer manipulate me with guilt or threats, they turned to something uglier: image. It started with the calls and messages from distant relatives I barely remembered. Aunt Diane, who hadn't invited me to her son's wedding. Uncle Martin, who once borrowed money and never paid it back. Cousins whose birthdays I didn't even know. They reached out one after another, each one parroting the same script, like rehearsed actors in a bad play. "Aunt Diane, Claire, I'm really disappointed in you. Your parents sacrificed everything for you." "Uncle Martin, don't let money poison your heart. Family is more important." "Cousin Tara, I heard your parents are about to lose their home. How could you do this to them? Each message made my jaw clench tighter. I knew exactly where this was coming from. My mother, always the master of dramatic narratives, had rewritten the story, cast herself as the grieving matriarch abandoned by her ungrateful, heartless daughter. In her version, I was the villain, the traitor, the one who turned her back when they were most vulnerable. It was all lies. They weren't losing their home. The mortgage was current because I had paid it for the last 6 years. They weren't struggling to survive. They were just struggling to adjust to a life without my wallet attached. But my mother wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to destroy any sympathy I might have earned. She couldn't win against me with facts, so she weaponized shame. And for a moment, I almost let it slide. But then I looked at the messages again. The judgment, the false pity, the smug righteousness of people who didn't know a damn thing. And I realized something. I didn't need their love anymore. I needed the truth to be louder than their lies. So I opened my laptop, logged into Facebook, a place I rarely posted anything, and began to write. Not out of spite, not for revenge, but because for once in my life I was done being quiet. I tried to be a good daughter, but they never truly loved me. For over 10 years, I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to support my parents, covering their mortgage, utilities, even my siblings' tuition and living expenses. I never asked for anything in return. When my parents finalized their will, they left everything, their home, their vacation cabin, every asset, to my siblings. Their reason? You have your own life. They need more help. When I protested, they called me selfish. When I stopped paying their bills, they called me a traitor. Now, they're spreading lies that I abandoned them, that they're on the verge of losing their home. None of it is true. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing this for anyone who's been used by their own family and made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. You do not have to keep suffering to prove your loyalty. Refusing to be used is not betrayal. And sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who bleed you dry. I've walked away, and for the first time in my life I have no regrets. I hit post. I didn't expect what came next. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of shares. By the end of the day, it had gone viral. My inbox flooded. Some messages were filled with anger. Strangers calling me bitter, entitled, selfish. But many more were filled with solidarity. People who said they saw themselves in my story. People who whispered, "Thank you. I thought I was alone." 3 hours later, my mother called. I picked up calmly. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped. I didn't raise my voice. Telling the truth. "You're destroying this family's reputation." "No," I said. "You did that the moment you turned me into the villain to protect your lies." She was silent for a beat. "You'll regret this." I smiled, slow and cold. "No, Mom, you will." And then for the last time I hung up. And this time I didn't feel broken. I felt free. 3 months passed. Not a single text. Not a single call. Not even a stray email from a relative trying to rebuild the bridge. After the Facebook post, I had blocked every number that mattered. And for the first time in over a decade, my world was silent, not in the lonely kind of way, but in the way a room feels after a storm finally passes. The space I used to fill with obligation and guilt now belonged to me. It was strange at first. The freedom, the absence of chaos. I didn't know what to do with it. For years, my identity had been tangled in everyone else's survival. If someone needed bailing out, I was there. If something broke, I fixed it. If they shouted, I softened. I didn't realize how much of myself I had abandoned in the process. Now, there was no one to manage but me. I signed up for a photography class I'd been eyeing for years, but never dared to commit to. I booked a solo trip to Paris, spent my mornings sipping espresso by the Seine, my afternoons wandering through old bookstores, my nights walking cobblestone streets, lit by soft gold street lamps. I spoke to strangers, took blurry, perfect photos, laughed for no reason. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of Machu Picchu, the wind tearing through the ancient ruins around me. My lungs burned from the altitude, but I'd never breathed so clearly. I was halfway around the world, and not a single part of me felt tethered to the past. I was no longer someone's savior, no longer someone's crutch. I was just me. I didn't seek out news of my family, but whispers have a way of finding you. Linda Bennett, my mother, had taken a job as a waitress in a small diner on the outskirts of Portland. A former coworker of hers ran into her one day and said she barely recognized the woman who used to wear diamonds and speak in commands. She looked tired, smaller, not physically but in presence. Robert, my father, was working part-time at a construction supply warehouse. No more Friday golf outings. No more long silences while sipping Merlot. Now he stood behind a counter, scanning items and pretending not to notice when customers recognized him. Ethan had bounced through 3 startups in 6 months. No investors, no funding. The same friends who used to enable him now kept their distance. He still wore the hoodie, but the swagger was gone. Jasmine tried to keep up her influencer persona, but without anyone footing the bill, her feed dried up. No more tropical vacations, no more boutique hauls, just filtered selfies in old clothes, reposted like they were new. They weren't just struggling, they were unraveling, and I didn't feel guilty. I had given them every chance. I had carried them for years. I had offered love, loyalty, sacrifice. They chose greed, entitlement, and betrayal. Their collapse wasn't karma. It wasn't revenge. It was the simple math of cause and effect. And me? I kept moving forward. A year after that dinner, the one that cracked everything open, I met Alex. I wasn't looking for love. Honestly, I didn't think I had space for it anymore. But he appeared quietly, like spring sunlight slipping through the blinds. No demands, no expectations, just patience. We met during a hiking trip with mutual friends. He carried the extra water bottle without asking, listened more than he talked. When I told him parts of my story, he didn't flinch. He didn't offer pity, just said, "You deserve better. I'm glad you got out." He didn't want anything from me but me. And for the first time, that was enough. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my Seattle apartment, a glass of wine in hand, city lights flickering below. The air was cool, crisp, the kind that reminded you you're alive. They had cut me out of the will, thinking it would break me. They thought they were punishing me, but they didn't realize it was the greatest gift they could have ever given me. Claire Bennett's story isn't just about being cut out of a will. It's about the moment someone wakes up and realizes they've been building a life around people who never planned to do the same for them. It's about the quiet strength it takes to walk away, not in anger, not in drama, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after years of being manipulated, used, and guilt-tripped into believing that love must always be earned. For a long time, Claire believed that giving would eventually lead to belonging, that if she sacrificed enough, her family would see her value. But some people don't see love, they only see utility. And when that utility runs dry, so does their affection. Walking away wasn't easy. It never is. But sometimes walking away isn't about turning your back on your family. It's about turning toward yourself for the very first time. Her story reminds us of something we all need to hear. You don't owe your life to people who treat your love like currency. You don't need to stay small to keep others comfortable. And you don't have to stay in the role they wrote for you just because you've been playing it for years. Claire was never greedy. She was generous. She was never cold. She was conditioned to survive. And in the end, she didn't need revenge in the way they expected. She didn't need to scream or fight or prove anything. She just needed to leave. And that was enough. What about you? Have you ever felt like Claire, like the one who gave everything and was still told it wasn't enough? Have you ever walked away and found freedom on the other side? Tell us in the comments. Your story matters, and you're not alone. And don't forget to follow this channel for more real, raw, and unforgettable revenge stories from people just like you.